recording now. So I would like to welcome everyone to the Second String Debate Team podcast. Second String Debate Team podcast. Second String Debate Team. Second String Debate Team. Second String Debate Team podcast.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of Rambling Over a Cactus. We haven't done this in a while. We actually haven't done like a discussion-based podcast form in a while.
No, not for a second.
But, it's the end of probably the shittiest year in a long time. And Alex, you had the good idea of just kind of, more or less just rehashing this and kind of looking back at this year that we've been through.
Let's consider this the final thought process of 2020, and after this, we'll
just shut your brains off.
Yeah, we'll rehash it one more time just to remind you how much better life will be, and then we'll never speak of this again.
And then also we've got John operating the camera today. He will chime in intermittently when he feels like he has something profound to say. And so I mean, shit, dude, it's crazy. When I was kind of coming up with some notes the last couple of days and thinking about this year as a whole, I feel like relatively January, February were somewhat normal. Coronavirus was still more of a talking point than it was an actual pandemic. But I remember when everything actually shut down, the state of emergency and the stay-at-home order and all that.
Because we were actually supposed to do a podcast that day.
We were. Yeah, you were on your way. Yeah, that's right. You were on your way down. And then, nobody knew anything about it. That's right. That's why we started the online or the FaceTime.
Yeah, it's been so long.
Sorry for all the terrible audio on those, by the way.
Yeah, but we've learned. We've gotten better. But yeah, no, it's weird. We've been doing it so long, over the computer that it's... I think,
and I might be incorrect here, but I think we actually have more podcasts that are filmed over FaceTime than we have that were filmed pre-COVID that were, either at this apartment or at my old place. Yeah, because
because we were basically doing one every weekend too for a while.
Yeah, we were like from May or from February to May, we did one almost every weekend, and then I don't even know, the shit just kind of hit the fan. But I don't know, man. It's so weird to think about everything that happened in the course of 1 year.
It's kind of like a bad relationship where you look back on it and you go, I know that was a bad relationship, but I can't remember every single individual thing.
Until you really sit down.
Yeah, because there's just so many.
So many.
There's so many things of 2020 that you just kind of sit back and you're like, when you remember it, you're like, of course it happened in 2020. Like, why wouldn't it?
Well, I think there was layers to what happened. Like when we first, at least for me, when we first got locked down and it was just, absolutely stay at home, nothing's open besides the grocery store basically.
Grocery store, gas stations, and some, what is it called?
Like chain restaurants, I guess.
Yeah.
You could get Domino's or whatever.
Essentials.
Yeah, essential. That's right.
That's what it was.
I remember how everybody freaked out about the essential paperwork that was going to come out, and then that never, sure, people got the piece of paper, but, there wasn't cops out in the streets hey, are you essential?
Well, then corporations and companies started, arguing that they were essential, and basically what it came out to was, almost everything's essential because it's linked through the web somehow.
Yeah, there's always some kind of leeway, I guess.
Yeah, the only thing that I really noticed when this all started in terms of my everyday life changing was, one, I wasn't going to work anymore, and two, I couldn't go to the gym. But other than that, my normal life did not really change that much.
No, and that's something that I don't mean this to sound insensitive or because I know that a lot of people suffered immensely.
Yeah.
Especially in the real lockdown months, March
and
through May.
especially in like California and
Yeah.
New York, where it was even harder, than Colorado. 'Cause
Yeah.
let's be honest, we live in Colorado. We didn't really get hit like other places did.
It's true. And the like when it first happened, I kind of had this weird sense of like, for the first time in my life, I had no responsibilities. Like I still had a job, but it was like to be determined when I would go back to it. And for the first time in my adult life, I had no responsibilities. And it was, I'm not gonna lie, it was kind of nice for a while, because like, you know, March through May in Colorado is not a terrible time to be here. So it was like, am I going to go play in the snow? Am I going to go rock climbing? Whatever it was. Like there was a couple months where it was just kind of like everything was frozen in time. It didn't matter. It wasn't like people looked down on you anymore for not doing anything. It was like, you can't do anything, so I spend all day outside. Fucking, it doesn't matter.
I had just gotten my fish when this all started, and like for 2 months I basically did nothing but baby my fish. And like it was acceptable. It was like, hey, at least you have a hobby you can do.
Yeah, well, and I think he helped a lot too, because I was looking, I think it's only his butt that's in the frame, but when I adopted Sturgill, I was looking through my phone the other day. It was like February 20th or something that I got him. And so like he really only knew 2.5 weeks of me going to work every day and like, you know, having a regular life. And then it was just like, bam, I'm home with him all the time.
Yeah.
And it was like, you know, I'm obviously I didn't know what was going to happen, but I'm super happy that I did get him, because we definitely.
Well, he's been a great pup for the house too.
Yeah.
You know, like, I don't know. He's a bonding agent for sure.
You're the best thing that happened in 2020. That's in my book. That's for sure. But now, kind of going back to that, I remember when everything shut down. You know, you had a lot of, obviously the corporations were not affected in any way, shape, or form by this. But you have, you know, small businesses, and especially where I used to live in Colorado Springs on the west side, it's all small businesses. It's all restaurants, breweries, you know, small mom and pop touristy shops and shit like that took a huge, huge toll. And I think that for me was that was like the first wake up to the severity of the situation for me, where I saw, you know, restaurants and businesses that I really loved were closing their door for the first time, and some of them still haven't reopened.
Yeah.
And you know, it's that small business struggle. Like, I don't know. It's.
Yeah. No. I mean, I lived it, because I am technically my own small business. Like once COVID happened, I remember I had like my second biggest month ever booked, and it was like every other day getting a phone call and like, hey, we're not going to shoot. Hey, we're not going to shoot. We're not going to shoot. And it was like, what would have probably that month would have like let me go probably 4 months. Like it was enough of a paycheck to survive for 4 months, just evaporated right as this was happening. I was like, fuck.
Yeah.
Like I have no income. Like the only thing that got me by was I also had my biggest month the month before that one. So that's the only reason I got by. But my savings account it's still hurting from that. Like 6 months of nothing is hard for anybody.
Yeah, I mean, when you know, it's when you're a like, you know, non-essential personnel, you're kind of screwed in that way. You know, I think
it was even. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was gonna say it was even crazier too, because I remember, you know, it was like a double whammy when this first happened, right? So like, all of a sudden I don't have any work, all my shots got canceled, and then I go to the grocery store because I'm like, well, I need some food, and it's like, well, you have a couple $100, let's try and stock up, and you get there and there's nothing, and what is there is like filet mignon. You know, like that's what's left. There was no meat on the shelves. There was no bread. Like there was nothing there to buy. Mm-hmm. And like, you know, except for the most expensive stuff, like the things that people weren't going to spend $6-7 on when you could get a $3 version of it. So like I spent like I think $350 on groceries, and I came back with like what looked like $100 worth of groceries, just because everything I bought was like the higher end items, because that's all that was left.
Yeah.
And I was like, cool, I don't have a job, and I just spent way more money than I needed to, but.
Yeah, I mean, that's the same reason I had to turn Vanity Fair napkins into toilet paper, because, you know, I didn't have enough. And when I ran out, you had to get whatever was on the shelf, you know. And that was something to me too. I remember this day, and I think I put this up on our page actually. I remember walking through the grocery store, and the toilet paper, the paper towels, the napkins, any fucking thing made out of paper was just gone from the shelves.
Except for actual paper.
But I never got down to that part of wiping my ass, thank God. But you go two aisles down, and the beer aisle is stocked full. That was one thing. At no point was there ever a shortage of beer. I remember when Polis said he was going to shut down the dispensaries, and that was a 4-hour ordeal before he was like, "I'm just kidding. Go get your weed." Like, oh man, it was just, you know, and it's that to me was kind of refreshing though. Like, you know, sure, it was people, you know, pushing back so hard for you know, weed and booze, but like when they tried to shut down the liquor stores and the dispensaries, you really saw like an American idea of like liberty and don't fuck with me come out of people, where they were like, absolutely fucking not, bro. Like, if you're gonna put me in my house for the next undetermined amount of time, I'm not gonna be sober. Like, it's kind of saddening, but also kind of refreshing in that same way.
It was the reawakening of day drinking. For so long,
oh, dude.
You know, it used to be like in the 70s, you could have a scotch with a business meeting.
Mm-hmm.
Well, no more business meetings, so now we can have a scotch at 9 o'clock in the morning if you want to.
Now you can have a scotch in a Zoom meeting and put it in a coffee mug.
Yeah.
You're good to go, dude. Oh yeah, I don't know, man. But like through that portion of like the first like shutdown, quarantine, stay-at-home order, all that, I think there was a certain level, and it might have just been for me, but there was a certain level of like forced self-discovery. I don't think I wanted to get into my head and learn myself as much as I did, but I think it was a good thing, because when you're forced to just stay at home for that long, you just kind of have no choice but to be like, well, you know, you're for the first time in my life, I was put constantly face to face. I had no distractions. I didn't have the gym. I didn't have school. I mean, I guess I had schoolwork, but it was online. That doesn't fucking count. I didn't have anything consuming my mind all the time. And so I'm forced with like seeing my good habits, seeing my bad habits, seeing everything laid out in front of me. And it came to a certain point where I was like, I have to fix X, Y, and Z, keep A, B, and C.
Yeah.
But you know, I think if there was anything good about, you know, just sitting in the house for fucking ever.
Right. Well, you know, it was good too, because this comes back to one of our earlier podcasts too, which we were discussing, you know, me only knowing myself as a photographer. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that came out of that was like do more hobbies. And for me, it really, because I couldn't go photograph things anymore, I was forced, like you said, to find something else to do.
Yeah.
And that's where my fish tank came in, which now I have 4 of them. Like, started flying my helicopter, you know, and just finding these other side hobbies that were nothing related to photography, because I had to. There was just nothing else to do.
Yeah, it was like, well, yeah, like I picked up mountain biking again. I got, you know, just anything to, because that, and I think that's just, I think there are certain people that have a very easy time just like sitting at home and like watching TV, playing video games, and that's fine. It's just not like, I get stir crazy real easy. And so I picked up more fucking hobbies than I knew what to do with at a certain point. I was just like, I'll go snowshoeing, I'll go mountain bike, I don't care. Like, just anything to drown out the, because that's what I realized too, is like, you know, we're so reliant on being stimulated all the time. And back, pre-COVID, there was no shortage of that, not like at all.
Yeah.
Everywhere you went, there was some kind of stimulus, and it's just everything shuts down, and it's just you're left to yourself, really.
Yeah, and you know what? Like, again, I think because I am somebody who typically wants to work really hard on what I'm doing, and I was so focused on photography in my business, like, this almost was like a check for me. Like, oh, if I want to, I can just sit here and watch TV. I don't have to constantly be working on something, which was hard for me to do before this pandemic, to like just sit still. And this like allowed me to actually be able to like learn to sit still and be okay with sitting still.
I will say that I did at one point have to realize that like there comes a point where you do have to adapt to the times you're in. And part of that is understanding that sometimes in this environment, in this new world, I guess, there's nothing to do. You just have to be content with just spending time with yourself, which I think is a good thing. I remember too, though, like when everything first was happening, I didn't know how chaotic it was going to be. And like John had brought this up earlier, like, on everything on Netflix became about revolution and chaos and all this. And I remember, I take Sturgill for a run or a walk at least every day. And I remember one time I was like 2 days into the stay-at-home order or whatever. I was like, I'm going to take dog for a walk. And, wallet, phone, keys, blah, blah, blah. And like as I'm shutting the door, I was like, are you fucking retarded? Like, get a gun. Because I didn't know. Like I went and I never used to carry when I would walk him around the block or whatever, because I knew my neighborhood, I knew my neighbors well. There wasn't, besides for the weird hobos, there wasn't a lot of shit that went on. But for the first time, I was like, dude, I don't know how people are going to behave.
Right.
And like, in my head, you watch so many of these movies about almost an exact situation. You see people dissolve into these, terrible fucking degenerate criminals. And so like that got in my head. Now, after a while, I think I realized that, Americans are just innately comfortable people. And as long as
their needs are met.
As long as your basic needs, I guess, are met. And don't get me wrong, there was surges of crime, there was things like that. And I lived in Colorado Springs. I'm definitely grateful for that.
And we now live in Denver, and we're not in any way in a bad place. No,
and even bringing that up, when I moved to Denver, I hit up an old friend of mine, and he was like, oh, you're in Denver now? He's like, how fucking crazy is it? And I was like, it's not.
Yeah.
Like, not crazier than anywhere else, man. Like, the whole thing's in shambles.
But yeah, I mean, you brought up the Netflix thing, and I think, like, again, coming back to, like, being okay with sitting still, like, I didn't typically watch movies or shows that often, like maybe it'd be on in the background when I'm editing photos or whatever, but like I actually sat down and started watching movies. And the funny thing is, fast forward 8-9 months later, and streaming content is almost boring now because you've watched everything there is on the platforms anymore. Yeah,
I mean, well, one thing too, the thing that's like I find the most frustrating about like the streaming platform narrowing down is stand-up comedians can't really perform so much anymore. So like, cause that was what I mainlined that shit from Netflix. I just love that. And now, it's not every single week there's another big name comedian coming out with a role or a special. It's like, I don't know. It's a silly thing. But speaking of Netflix and kind of, drowning the pool there, or I guess, emptying the pool, there's nothing left. We were, I think more so than ever, we were forced to like see the TV show of our media in a way. Yeah. Like you had brought up a point yesterday, and I do agree with you. I think the right-wing media, they fuel off of making these like insatiably chaotic headlines. Yeah. And these the world is ending. Yeah, it's fear-mongering. And we see on the other side, the left is they just eat that shit up. And that's where all their stories come from. Is there was
CNN's news channel is basically like, look how stupid the right is.
Yeah.
That's their news. There's no news
they're
presenting.
Well, and that's the same with Fox. It's look at these liberals and they're out here, da-da-da. And it became so drastic that we saw different sides to something that should never have different sides. We saw people being divided over fucking human rights, over basic shit that should have never been a discussion in the first place, but because we have these two massive entities that we go to for our information, our news, that's what happened. And I think that in the early stages, it was the coverage was, you had one side saying that the virus was basically nothing, and the other side saying that it's like the Black Plague, and if you go outside, you're going to grow a dick on your forehead, and that's going to be the end of your life. And it's like, from there, you had nowhere to balance what was actually going on.
Yeah. I think the only place you had was Dr. Fauci actually speaking in real, like, to the truth of the matter. I mean, a lot of his answers, when people were like, they were pressing him, at the very beginning, a lot of his answers were, we don't know.
Well, and that's a feasible answer when you don't know.
Right, but, you look at the other sides of, some people were saying it's not going to be anything, and other people were saying it's the end of life as we know it. And here's Dr. Fauci literally just saying, we just don't know. Like, you guys are speculating way too much for the information that we have.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, you had no clear answers. That was the problem. Yeah. And I think that people were forced to see that for the first time in regard to the media, that if you look at one extreme or the other, you're never going to get a clear, concise answer. You're going to get an agenda. Yeah. And I think, in a way, I think that it's a huge blessing, because I'm seeing more people my age, our age, whatever, that are starting to realize that the news as we know it is a joke. It doesn't benefit anyone or anything, because even when, even moving down the timeline, like when, I get there was other shooting, or there was other killings before George Floyd, obviously, but that was the one, the epicenter of, literally the largest civil rights movement in history.
Let me ask you this, because this has been posed before, but do you think that if it wouldn't have happened during the pandemic, or if George Floyd would have happened any other time, would it have been as powerful? Or was it because that there were so many people who had all the time in the world now, because they can't go to work, that there was the ability for people to mass together to protest, and maybe if it wasn't for the pandemic, the voices would have been distracted by other things in their life?
I think to a certain degree that is true. People were cooped up, they had time on their hands. But I think when you look at the timeline even before COVID, it was coming to a point where police brutality was becoming undeniable. Like, you had Devon Bailey, you had Ahmaud Arbery, you had Breonna Taylor, you had all these African Americans that were killed by either police or, in Ahmaud Arbery's case, that was just straight fucking murder. But it was coming to a point where I think, regardless of the pandemic or not, I think that people had to wake up. Yeah. Because there comes a point where and I guess you can say on either side, but it doesn't really translate. Numbers don't lie. And when you have the statistics and you have these stories of just like blatant fucking mishandlings of the police, you have blatant racism, which is what happened to Ahmaud Arbery. Something had to happen. And I do think that people being forced to stay at home and having all that time was part of the reason that so many people took to the streets. But I do think that it was getting to the point where it was undeniable anymore. Yeah.
And then that kind of sparked the whole, defund the police argument too, which, let's be clear, we talked to some people downtown, and defund the police was really a shorthand for an idea. And most people we spoke to did not actually believe in taking away all of the police's money. What they were really trying to say was take some of the militarization budget and put it into social services that would actually benefit the community and probably reduce crime. So that but somehow the right wing took this shorthand and turned it into, well, they just want anarchy.
Yeah. And that's exactly it. That's you can't look for an answer there, because you're right. That's exactly what they did. They took an idea that wasn't meant to be, all inclusive, like no more, because that's what they were saying. Oh, they don't want any more police force. They don't want this. They don't know what they're talking about. No, people just wanted a police force that recognized the principle that they're a civil servant.
Yeah.
That's and I think that's what people, I fucking hope, above all else, I hope that people realize this year that we have viewed our civil servants and our politicians as deities, and they are not that. They are civil fucking servants. They are elected by us, not the cops, but the politicians. And so, well, let's break that down. Politicians are chosen by us to lead us. They're not supposed to be celebrities. They're not supposed to be rock stars. They're not supposed to be this godlike presence that we fucking... And with our civil servants, we have to recognize that they volunteered for a job to be a civil servant. They're not above us. They're not underneath us. They're literally citizens who have fucking taken a role to look out for other citizens.
Yeah.
And I think that, like I said, I hope that realization can stay around. Because my biggest fear is that so much change, so much happened in 1 year.
It kind of gets lost in the ether.
Yeah, like, is it just gonna are people just so ready to like go back to restaurants and go back to bars and shit? Are we gonna forget everything that was learned in this year? Or are we gonna actually remember what happened so that, this fucking catastrophic of a year doesn't just happen again?
Right. And I hate to say it, but Americans are very forgetful. And sadly, I think we'll put up with it for a while. We'll be good patriots, but it kind of just after 9/11, like there was that huge outpour of patriotism, but it started to wane relatively quickly.
I mean, I've brought it up before, but I don't think patriotism is such a skewed term anymore. It's mixed in with tribalism. Like, your patriotism has something to do with the party you vote for. Go fuck yourself. That's not how that works. Patriotism goes to caring for the whole country, the betterment of the whole way of life.
And that's one thing that I think the right-wing media just does not want to acknowledge, that somehow if you're a Democrat, you're unconstitutionally...
Yeah, they make it to where if you're a Democrat, you can't be a patriot, and that's not the case. You can be a Democrat, you can be a Republican, you can be a Libertarian, you can vote for fucking, it doesn't matter. As long as your interest is in the betterment of America as a whole, as your countrymen, that's what matters. It does not matter.
And I think there's some irony here in the right wing's arguments, which is, they're trying to say that Democrats are doing unconstitutional things and stealing elections and doing all these things. And so somehow that makes them like the evil entity, yet a lot of what they're accusing the Democrats of, they are doing themselves.
Yeah,
and the sad thing is, I don't see any argument that is in the betterment of the country in any way.
No, it's Go ahead.
I was going to say, well, nothing is democratic about the system we've created here in this country. I mean, if you think about it, coming from how you win a presidential election or how you're voted in Congress, picking their own salaries based on, or when they retire, indeterminate contracts. I mean, it's all a joke. There's nothing democratic about having to spend $40 million to win a presidency. If you're really there for the system, you're there for the system. until we kind of get rid of the private investment or the private kind of gains given to the politicians by lobbying and by lobbyists and by these big corporations that basically push money into their pockets and get things funded, not because it's for the better of the country, for the better of the people, but it's for the better of that system and that entity. And they're swayed by how much money they're paid, not by if it's right or wrong for the people. And nothing in this country will change until we change the political agenda in this country.
Right.
Yeah, and you're completely right. There is nothing democratic left about it. If the last two elections haven't proven to you that we live in an oligarchy now, I don't know what will, because we are faced with, if you look back when in like early American history, when they were really trying to preserve a democracy and trying to figure out how to operate a democracy, we used to have 5, 6, 7 different major candidates on the ballot.
Yeah.
Each one, some of them were Republican, some of them were Democrat, but they all had a different view, a different agenda that they wanted for the country, and it was, you could choose between many Republicans, many Democrats. We've come down to a certain point where, I hate the argument of it, but it is infallibly kind of true. Like, when you vote for a third party, that vote goes fucking nowhere anymore, and it's a travesty. It's a travesty that we are forced to narrow our options in what we like to call a democracy down to two fucking people that the majority of people didn't like.
Yeah.
Based on financial resources. The only reason why they're heard or why they're in the spotlight is because they have more money for campaigning, more fucking private investment for all the other bullshit that we consider the system here, the democratic system.
Yeah,
And it's always guised on change too. It's always, I'm going to do better than the last guy. Well, I don't know how true that actually ever is.
Well, let me ask this, like, because we have come to the point where it is, whoever has the most money is going to be able to represent that party and lobby interests and all that kind of shit. Do you think this is for either of you, do you think we've come too far to where, could we ever go back to where we can open the political spectrum to someone with a genuine agenda to help the country? Or are we only going to listen to money? Like, are we fundamentally corrupt at this point to where there is no backtracking?
That's a twofold answer. As human beings, and we should know this just based on our history, everything is cyclical. We have recreated and continually, how should I say this? We've continually faltered and gone back to past wrongs, and we never really learn, because as a human, you almost sometimes ignore right and wrong based on personal agenda, greed. You get what I'm saying here? So The idea is, I think until we change our mindset, and our system, nothing will change, because there's too much in place to protect what we have going now for those people.
Well, I think too, there's also just this biological element of it that human beings are innately short-sighted, and that's just how our minds are designed to work. We don't think long-term. So I think unless biologically our brains start somehow switching to thinking long-term, you're right, it's not going to change. We're just going to repeat the same things over and over again. I think that's why global warming is such a hard thing for some people to understand or think about planning for, because it's still 20 years away from it being like, oh fuck, we're seeing the results of it, but most people are thinking in the here and now. What am I doing tomorrow? What am I doing next week? They're not thinking, what am I going to be doing 20 years from now?
I think also too, though, it's less thinking and it's more what's happened or what's occurred to you personally. So, for instance, when you see something on the news, a travesty, a something that's happened overseas or something that hasn't directly affected you, you look at it and you say, okay, that's horrible. But at the same time, within 10 minutes, it's out of your mind because it hasn't directly affected you.
Yeah.
Whereas when you have something that has directly affected you, you live through it, you experience it, you hang on to it and you understand it in a different way. And I think one thing we should talk about and learn also through this pandemic is the concepts of prison reform and the concepts of animal rights and all these other things. So you figure, I can't tell you how many times throughout the last 6-7 months there's been discussions about mental illness because of people who have to stay indoors for excessive periods of time. Well, when it comes to prison reform and a discussion of these types of topics, people are always like, oh, like they deserve what they get, this and that and that. But then when you think about it, in hindsight, you're like, okay, how do you feel being locked in? You're in your home, comfortable, with cable, a fridge full of food. You can go and leave as you please. You're still having issues mentally, feeling depression, feeling anxiety, feeling this sense of loneliness and isolation. Well, now translate that into something like the prison system, where these people are forced to live in, horrid conditions. The prison system is based on monetary funding. It's completely privatized. It's not helping or reforming anybody. It's made to make money and to house people, and that's one of the biggest problems. I mean, we don't think about things until we experience them, but then now this pandemic should really help us look into a few different topics, and reassess the way we, think about certain issues.
Yeah, I completely agree with you, because it's kind of hard to put this into words, but like, just because a pandemic happened does not mean that all the other underlying societal problems that we had before this just went away. We still have one of the largest opioid epidemics in the world, in this country. We have one of the most fucked up prison systems.
We have the most people in prison of any first world nation.
Yeah, and this directly, like you said, if it doesn't affect you, then you don't care.
Privatized system.
And the reason that
for making money.
Yeah, and the reason that people were so able to, get on one side or the other when it came to COVID in the United States is it affected them directly one way or another. But with that, like, the other problems we haven't disappeared. All the things that people used to be up in arms about, they're only getting worse, and it's because we're not focusing any attention to the other things. Like, I'm not saying that you can just say, oh, we ignore COVID, coronavirus, whatever the fuck. But we have to allocate our energy. Like, we have to allocate time to fix the
underlying issues.
Yeah. I don't know.
COVID may have helped, I think, bring a lot of those to the foreground too, because like you said, like, there's some things, like John said, there's some things that unless it's personally affected you, you may not even think about. But because we've all to some extent been cooped up in our houses, watching the news to see what's going on with COVID or whatever topic it is, you're also partaking in learning about other issues that may have been going on. So they're becoming more to the forefront of you as the individual who may not have experienced them, but now because you're watching the news more often, you're hearing about it more often, and it's becoming something that I think the populace is becoming more aware of certain issues that you probably never would have thought about.
Yeah. I mean, that's what we can hope for. We can hope that people had enough time on their hands to,
at least be aware of the situation.
Just be aware, because that's the thing. If you look at if you look at people, ignorance and fear drive the most compelling stories.
Yeah.
And if we can get people just away from ignorance and just to look, because that's the thing. Like, and I think that's a beneficial part of 2020, and we've been forced to realize that our country is not just, star-spangled fucking fantastic.
Yeah.
We have a terrible history with certain things. We have a lot of blemishes in our past. And if you want to continue to be the greatest country on earth, you got to acknowledge that shit.
Yeah,
You
and
have to. You
sometimes-
have to learn to grow from. And then, you know, that's the thing. Oh, well, I didn't do that. That was my ancestors. It
Well, I
doesn't
think
fucking matter. It's the same timeline. Fix it.
Yeah. No, I think it comes back to the Americans' ideology of like, what was I going to get to? Like, we need to take acceptance. We always want someone else to fix stuff for us
Mm-hmm.
because we're very, I'll say we're self-centered to an extent. I mean, not always across the country, but the American idea in and of itself is kind of self-centered. Like, pick yourself up by the bootstraps. Like, it's all about you. And, you know, we don't necessarily always take, or we're not always willing to make sacrifices for the benefit of others. And I think fundamentally that's what we need to do if we want to fix stuff. Like, you can say I don't believe in COVID, but I want to go back to work. Well, you need to take some responsibility to help fix the problem too. That means wearing a mask and not getting butt hurt that you have to wear a mask when you go into a grocery store. Like, not wearing a mask doesn't help the cause for you to get back to work. You have to sacrifice some things in order to grow and in order to fix things.
Mm-hmm. No, and I think that, you know, there's a misconstrued conception about just the masks in themselves. Like, oh, you're taking away my liberties, you're taking away my freedom. Sure, that's true. However, your liberties and freedoms have been infringed for the last basically like 70 years now. Like, we haven't lived in a real free state of America, or a free country, for a long time. You know, and
we're just free
I get it.
in other places.
Although, one thing to contradict that, like the idea though
How
of
dare
the
you
American
contradict
dream.
me.
I know it's dangerous. Just personally being, you know, I've kind of traveled a little bit, so I've gotten to experience a lot of third and second world countries and what they've gone through, and seeing actually, you know, a very first world experience of like what it is to suffer and what it is to be without, or, you know, what is a necessity, what is a want. And in this country, you know, we've grown accustomed to having our wants and thinking they're necessities because everything is so quick and so tangible here. And that is part of this American dream. And that's why you have so many people that fight to come here, and why we have such a big and open kind of genre, plethora of culture, which makes America so great. It's because of this ability to, you know, to take your own life into your own hands and kind of make yourself what you want to be. You know, there are a few countries where there's caste systems still, but a lot of it comes down to kind of economic struggles and how much one can obtain financially, and how they can support themselves. And when you come here, you have the ability to be who you want to be and not forced to be what people tell you to be. And that's the beauty of this country. And a lot of times, you know, with all the bullshit going on now, you know, especially politically, and just the craziness of the times, and kind of like almost the game show aspect of the Trump campaign and his 4 years in office, and how crazy it's been. But at the same time, there is a lot of beauty and good to what the American dream offers, especially to people that come from something that we don't know, or from something that's far less than what we would consider to be, you know, low income, or, you know, what it may be. So I think the hope is like to then use this and like keep bettering our country, and mainly the hierarchy is the problem here. You know, we have the media and also the political agenda, which are two things that stunt growth in this country, and they're so rooted in such backward mentality that it's hard to fight it. It's slowly changing, but you know, the idea is to get these politicians that are so rooted in certain ways out, because they're never going to change. You can't have new minds, new concepts, new ideology when you have somebody that's been in the same position for 30 years and thinks the same as they did fucking 30 years ago. It's not how it works anymore. And you'll never progress if these people are continuously able to dictate what we think is right and wrong for where we're going.
Well, I think, you know, me and Javin watched the movie Airplane the other night, and we watched that movie, and you could not make that movie nowadays. In 2019, you could not make that movie. And I think what you're kind of getting at is like, well, how do we how do we change the system if you still believe what you believed 40 years ago? Wait for them to die. And the new generation will come up, and hopefully with new ideologies.
I feel like that's dangerous, though, because
Very dangerous.
you have this.
I didn't say it was a good way. I just said it's a way.
It's a way.
You can't wait though till they die.
Well, and you look at, it's a cliche thing, but history repeats itself. You look at, you look at like Nixon's presidency. You can compare that very closely to Trump's presidency. And you would think that Americans would have learned a bullshitter when they see one, but the thing that I think is people need to drive themselves away from
Bullshit.
no, you can have a political affiliation, be a Republican, be a Democrat, whatever, but overall be an American. That's the main difference anymore. We don't have Americans anymore. We have people that are right or left, and they think that their idea is the best for the country. And the only way that I could see real progress coming through to where people want to make better educated decisions for what happens with the country is partisanship, but I don't know if it's possible anymore. I really don't know if the two sides have just become so far divided. Like, I mean,
Trump has definitely made that a serious issue because right now, politically, things are so fucking sided, it's insane.
Yeah,
whereas 30 years ago you could believe in X or Y, but nowadays you're either Democrat or Republican, and like Trump has definitely pushed that to the extreme, obviously. But at the same time, I think one of the biggest problems with why this country is so divided is where and how we get our news. Because I'm sorry, while yes, the internet has opened up a world of opportunity for people that are suppressed by their governments or suppressed in other countries, at the same time, it's also opened up a world that allows ignorance to thrive. And people in the Deep South, because I've lived there for the past few years, and I'm going to tell you, what they hear as news is not the same as what you hear as news. And not everybody is able to have, cable TV. Some people literally live off of what they hear on the radio based off of what area they're in. So they're just getting a very one-sided view of the world and of the state of affairs. And a lot of this is the political game that is talked about by the media. The media is based off of ratings. They're not about the news. They like to feed into things and they use it to push ratings, whether it's good or bad. So you'll have people that are fucking up in arms or just really sentimental about a topic that they've heard about through the media that may not be accurate at all. But because they heard it through this source, they believe it to be true, and then they base all of their facts and opinions on this idea that's totally fucking misconstrued or fucking off the rocker. But at the same time, you can't even blame them because that's all that they get. So the media is one of the biggest problems with change in this country, honestly.
And you bring it up there, like, it's a real travesty to a certain point that you have people, Americans, that realize that their media is a fucking joke, and so a lot of people turn to online sources. Some online sources are great. Some are very well educated, very well articulated, great points. And then you have fucking garbage like QAnon that people just eat up. And it's a travesty because people have the right intention. They want to be actually educated. They want to know the real thing, but they fall down these deep rabbit holes where they're being exposed to even more bullshit than they were in the first place. And it's like, it's just almost, it sucks that we can't, the news, because that's the thing, like you said, the news is all about fucking ratings. The news is not supposed to be exciting. The news is supposed to be informative, and that is it. There's not supposed to be any fucking flashing lights or colors or bullshit. It's supposed to be informative. It is supposed to help the people, and
even if it's hard to digest.
Yes. And that's just not what we have anymore. We have the right and the left wing media, and then we have people online, which I guess you could call us out for as well.
Yeah.
But you have people that are just spouting out conspiratorial nonsense that doesn't help anyone.
No.
And it's, I don't know. We live in an age where we have almost too much information. You know what I mean? Like,
And it's not quality either. That's the other thing. Is like, it would be one thing if we had all that information, but it was quality. Right now, it's like quality is this much, and then bullshit is this much,
Quantity, yeah.
or speculation where speculation doesn't belong either.
I mean, when you have a 24/7 news cycle, you always have to be
Gotta feed the
reporting something.
monster. Yeah, you got to feed the monster.
Because there's people that are watching 24/7, and you don't want them to change the channel.
You can't, because you lose money. That's the whole idea of this commercialized industry. And while it's a great thing because it gives you the ability, like I said, this idea of the American dream to arrive at a certain level that you may not be able to attain where you're at, or even just the hope. Hope drives everything, man. Hope is one of the most dangerous things you can fucking do. It's like, it can be a great thing, but it can be a very bad thing. And
Yeah, hope and fear are two sides of the same coin.
Yeah. Well, and that's what we saw with this last election. You see people putting their hope and their devotion into one person or the other to solve your problems, and that's just not the way it works. Neither of those candidates give a fuck about you, and they're not going to solve your problems. Like, it's, I think it was you that brought it up. People, we are, for a society that likes to boast about how free and how much liberty we have, we don't do anything without fucking daddy government holding our hand and helping us through it. There's no, I don't know. It's, anyways, yeah, 2020 fucking sucked.
Yeah, and just when, I mean, this kind of comes back. Well, this just kind of comes back to like 2020. So many bad things has happened in 2020 that towards the end of it, you almost like, I don't want to say you want to watch the world burn, but like there is a little bit of an excitement, and the news is playing off this. Where you're like, you kind of want to wake up in the morning, turn on the news just to see what crazy shit has also happened since the last 24 hours. Because 2020 has just been one of those years where it's like, of course there was a Christmas Day car bombing. Of course there was. Like, that's par for the course for 2020. And as we're sitting here on the verge of 2021, in Denver, the first new virulent strain of the new COVID is here in Colorado. So, happy 2021.
Well, and go ahead.
Go ahead, you first.
I just hope that people can understand that, 2020 is ending, but the situation is not. We have dug ourselves into a hole here.
Yeah.
That, New Year's Eve
is not the end.
It's not the hard reset. We don't go back to normalization. We have a long road ahead of us, and I just hope that people can make up their minds for themselves. Just be free thinkers. If we could do that, fuck, man.
We'd be in a lot better place, for sure.
Thank you.